Welcome to the fire tower at Fairview Outdoor School. We're just now reaching the top of our fire tower, which will give us a great view of the surrounding area. And what I want you to do now is I simply scan around and we take a 360-degree view of the surrounding area, is just think, what do I see? What do I notice? And what do I wonder? Keeping in mind, our goal is to determine what happens to flowing water that leaves the fire tower location. Hopefully you have some ideas and thoughts about what you were just able to see. I want to point out a few features that might help us to understand how the shape of the land and what we see around us impacts the flow of water from the fire tower area. At the base of the fire tower is a little bit of a peak, a ridge, and this section of the mountain is part of the Fairview mountain. And so that ridge kind of goes out this direction and it goes behind us. An important feature to understand is this, that this mountain does not continue to the high peak beyond us. Where I'm pointing, right here you can see kind of a natural stop to the trees in front of us. And then we look farther and we see this distant peak. In between the two, there is a gap or a break in the landscape. So the land drops there and allows for a road to travel through that section and even a stream. Now to the west of us is an area that's known locally as Draper Valley. And Draper Valley is a small piece of land and it is surrounded by the higher Fairview Mountain and even some lower hills and the portion of the mountain that we're on that does drop down into Draper Valley, as you can see. So our chief goal today is to understand what happens to water that is flowing from this mountain. Well, if we think about Draper Valley, it may help us to understand. When rain falls or snow is melting in the valley, what happens to that water? Does it simply accumulate and fill up like a bowl? Or does the water have an exit? Well, something important to note while we're talking about Draper Valley is that from the mountains in front of us begins a small stream from springs that flow from the mountain, and that stream is known as Tom's Run. We will investigate that stream as part of this lesson. That stream finds its way through the gap that we've already talked about between these two sections of mountain. And that stream keeps flowing from Draper Valley through the gap and onto the Fairview property. It's hard to see. Tom's Run is located in the direction that I'm pointing. The section we will investigate and look at closely is down there. But a couple things to think about as we look around. We are now looking east. We had been looking west. In this direction, if it were a clearer day, we may be able to see some of the buildings and structures of Hagerstown, which would be located directly in front of us. And we notice on this side of Fairview Mountain, the land looks less bumpy, it looks flatter. But if you notice, there still are some rolling hills and there's some variation or change to the shape of the land. What impact do these hills and this change to the shape of the land have on the water that flows from here when it rains or snow is melting? So we will use this observation along with tools that we will use today. We will use maps on the iPad, physical maps. We will use our own observations from the fire tower top and from the base of the fire tower on the ground to help us develop an understanding of what happens to the water that does flow from here. Now, one final important feature to point out as we move from west now to east and now to more of a southerly direction. You may not be able to see it, and I know you can't, but right down here in this treed section where I'm pointing, the Potomac River flows, and it flows from this direction in the west, and it moves in an easterly direction through Washington County. And it is the largest river, the largest body of water in Washington County. And understanding not only where it is, but where it goes to will help us to understand how what's happening locally and what's happening in the state of Maryland and what happens into a bigger region known as the Chesapeake Bay watershed affects not only us, but millions of people in this region.